You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk right here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. How are you today? It's a beautiful Friday morning here in East Greenbush. We are the first and hopefully only streaming sports webcast here on Facebook, on YouTube, on any podcast outlet you can think of, iHeartRadio, Spotify, etc. Good morning, Dave Guyette. Good to see you this morning. Thanks for popping in. Listen, I want to thank my guest from last week, Dan Epstein, author of the new book out, The Captain and Me. He wrote with Ron Bloomberg. Great read, guys. Go to Amazon, get it. You'll see a link on the TGI Sports Talk page. He's also written some other great books as well from about 70s baseball, as we talked about. If you are into 70s baseball as I am, please take a look at this interview from Dan Epstein last week. My guest today, and again, I want to thank all the groups that allow me to share this too. I'll be sharing it to all the Cubs and Phillies and White Sox groups and all the Major League Baseball groups and some others, because my guest today is Warren Brusstar, former relief pitcher for the Phillies, part of the world champion 1980 Philadelphia Phillies. Also pitched with the White Sox for a short time, and Tony La Russa, and finish up his career with the Cubs. He went on to do some coaching in the Phillies organization, and as for the past 20 years has been the pitching coach for the Napa Valley Community College out there in California, and we'll talk a little bit about that. His wife, Jennifer, also is the president and CEO of the Tug McGraw Foundation. Tug McGraw, if you don't know, is a tremendous relief pitcher and quite a character for the Mets and the Phillies in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, and died tragically at a very young age of brain cancer. And they established his son, Tim, as you may know, a country singer, very famous country singer, and his wife, Faith Hill, and Jennifer and Warren Brusstar established this foundation in his name. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I did this interview last night with Warren because he does live in California. We had some technical difficulties at the beginning, so I'll play the video to start, and then I'm going to fast forward a little bit till we had to go to the phone because his phone connection was not working out well for the video. So without further ado, I will say good morning to Brett Cloutier, but without further ado, I'm going to start the interview, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. As
specifically a Sunday day game in Montreal, where I came into the game with the bases loaded and I faced Tony Perez. Now here's a person that I've idolized since I was a little kid. And I throw him a sinker. He hits a ground ball to Schmitty at third. Schmitty steps on third, throws it across the diamond, and I get out of the inning with a double play. And I go, I belong. I know I can play here now. So, it's a transition. And the biggest thing was they didn't tell me to do anything different than I'd done in the minor league. They gave me the ball and said, here, run with it. And I did. And I was very fortunate to play on AstroTurf early in my career. I would jam a lot of people with the velocity I had. And fortunately, playing on AstroTurf, the ball would get to the infielders and they could turn double plays. And then to have Mike Schmidt at third, Larry Bowa at short, Ted Sizemore, Manny Trio, Richie Hebner, Pete Rose at first in those years was very good. It made my job very easy because I was a ground ball pitcher. I believe my rookie year, we had 9 pitchers on the staff, and I think I had 23% of the ground ball double plays that the other team hit into. So I was very high percentage on getting ground balls and getting double plays. So that was kind of my niche. I came in the middle of the inning with runners on base anywhere from the first inning to the 7th inning. And then they would in the 8th and 9th inning, we had Gene Garber, Tug McGraw, and Ron Reed. They would pitch the last 2 innings because they were veteran pitchers. But finally, by the end of 1978, Danny Ozark called me in the office before we played the Dodgers in the playoffs. He said, "You're going to be the first guy in the out of the bullpen every night, whether it's the first inning or the 9th inning. It didn't matter what the situation was. You're the first guy coming out because you're getting ground balls consistently and you're getting people out consistently." So I pitched in 3 of the 4 games in that series, and the only game I didn't pitch in was lefty pitched a complete game, and I was up 5 times in that game. He struggled. He gave up a grand slam, I believe, to Ron Say, like the 4th or 5th inning to tie it at 5-5, and then we came back right after that, scored a couple runs, and he was able to hang on, and he ended up pitching all 9 innings.
Well, like I said, those were some great teams. But you ran into some really good Dodger teams in 77 and 78.
Right.
How tough was that to have those types of years and then, have it end in?
Well, the most difficult one was 1977 when we won the first game in Dodger Stadium. They won the second game. We went to Philly, and they still to this day call it Black Friday. We had a 5-3 lead with 2 outs and nobody on in the top of the 9th inning. And Vic Gabalio came up on it, got on first. Manny Mota hit a ball that Greg Lazinski pinned against the left field fence for a double. Next ball that was hit was a ground ball that hit the seam of the AstroTurf at third base, deflected off Mike Schmidt. Larry Bowa came out of nowhere and all in one motion threw the ball to first base. Richie Hebner caught it at first base. Davey Lopes is out by half a step, and Bruce Fromming called him safe. And they proceeded to, Gene Garber was pitching. He tried to pick Lopes off at first, threw the ball down the right field line. Lopes got to second. Next pitch, Bill Russell hit between his legs, and they beat us 6-5. And it's a game that we should have won. And if they had replay like they do today, we would have won that game, and that would have changed the whole way the series. Especially when you're only playing 5 games, that would have given us a 2 games to 1 lead.
Yeah.
With Elton pitching the next night. So that changes everything.
So with that said, and I'll veer off a little bit again, comparing today's game to your era. I mean, do you think replay is a good thing for situations like that, or do you feel like human error is part of the game?
Well, human error is part of the game as far as balls and strikes are concerned. I think that's going a little bit too far. But the object is, I like the way they're doing it now because they give you so many challenges, and that's it. And if you challenge and you're correct, you get another one. And I like the way that's structured because the object's to get it right. So teams aren't. There's still they still have problems with it. There's times where it's obvious the guy's out, they call him safe, and even the replay call him safe, and and you go, there's no way he's safe. So there's got to be that physical element. I mean, us as players, we make mistakes. The umpires make mistakes. It's just that's human nature.
So, as I said, very good teams in 78 or 77, 76 before you got there even.
Right.
They had won 3 straight division titles. 79 has struggled a little bit. I think Pete Rose came there in 79, but.
Right. Did. Yeah, and I missed the majority of 79. I pitched 14, and I had a bad arm. I hurt my arm in that 78, 79 season.
Yeah.
And back in the middle of it.
And the team struggled a little bit, but 1980, the team finally gets over the humps. I mean, pretty much it's still the same core of players.
Right.
You guys get over the hump and beat the Royals in the World Series. What was the big difference in those teams and not winning? Well, other than Bruce Fromming.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we had the pitching that matched up with Houston, and Houston lost J.R. Richard in the middle of that season. Had he been healthy and pitched in that series, I think there would have been a different outcome because we were very lucky. 4 of the 5 games went extra innings.
That was an amazing series, by the way. I jumped right to the Royals, and I'd forgotten about what a great series that Houston Philly series was in 1980. Every game was a nail biter.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, they were all exciting. 4 out of the 5 went extra innings. So there was action. Every you're on the edge of your chair, the edge of your seat, the entire series. And then after winning that, it was like we finally could relax and just play in the World Series, and made it so much easier. There was no pressure at all to win the World Series. We finally got to the World Series, and that's what we've been striving for. And now let's just go out and have fun playing baseball. I think that's what we did. I think we all felt a lot of pressure off our shoulders because of the failures in the past 3 out of the past 4 years of not being able to get to the World Series. And I was very fortunate. I played 9 years, and I was in the playoffs 5 different times. So I was very fortunate. I played in very, very good teams. I was also on the 84 Cub team that lost. We had a 2-game lead to San Diego and lost 3 in San Diego.
With those Phillies teams, was there a big difference between, Danny Ozark? They're different people, obviously, Danny Ozark and Dallas Green, personality-wise, I would guess. But was there a lot of difference playing for both of them?
Well, I think the difference was Danny kind of lost control of the team. After a while, we kind of became complacent with winning, and just had to go about just go out there to win. And I think when Pete came over, that changed everything. That changed a lot of the dynamic of the team. When you see a guy like that hustles and plays as hard as he plays, it kind of rubs off on everybody. I mean, even as a pitcher, it rubbed off on me to hustle, to do the best you could every time you went out there. I mean, it just, you owe it to the fans to give it your best all and prepare yourself on a daily basis to be the best you can be every night. And that's, I think a lot of that rubbed off when Pete got there. He really pushed people. Larry Boa and he were very, very good friends. And Boa, he stirred the drink. He kept everybody going and kept everybody active. And then when Pete came over, he kind of had somebody that he always looked up to. So the rest of us looked up to Pete. And when you're with Pete on a daily basis and see a man that plays that hard, you can't help but get excited to come to the ballpark to play and see what he do. I mean, he was amazing. He was fun to play with. I hated playing against him, and I loved playing with him. And he was the only guy I paid attention to that what I did lifetime off. He was 2 for 11 off me lifetime, and I'm more proud of that than probably anything else I did in baseball.
Well, that's pretty good when you only get 2 out of 4,500 hits or whatever he had, the final number. That's pretty good record.
Right.
What was it like? So we talked about Lefty and now Pete Rose. I mean, as far as Steve Carlton had a tough reputation in the press, but I in fact I just watched something on YouTube where his teammates seemed to really like Steve Carlton and in his persona with the press. I'm not sure where it came about, but he was a very misunderstood guy. From what I could gather from this little documentary I was watching on YouTube. What was your relationship personally with Lefty and even Pete?
Well, I had a good relationship with Lefty. Being a pitcher, you can always learn things from other pitchers. I can remember vividly being in Chicago, and we had a reliever named Kevin Saucier in Chicago and Wrigley. The locker room was very small, so the pitchers would wait till the position players got dressed, so they could go out to batting practice, and then we got dressed kind of in shifts. And Kevin Saucier went up to Lefty and said, how do you hold your slider? And Lefty's standard answer was, you hold it like this and throw the poop out of it. and about 5 minutes later, Lefty comes back and he starts discussing the slider. And he talks about elbow. You get your elbow higher, you're going to get more downward break. The flatter your elbow, the flatter the break. So I put that in my back pocket. I put that, there's something that I can really use. So now the count in the at bat determines what I'm going to do as far as the depth of my slider. Do I want it to go down more? Or do I want it flat? If I'm ahead 0-2, I want a flatter break that's going to run off the plate. If I'm 2-0, I've got to throw it on the plate for a strike, so I want more depth. I want it to go down more so it changes plane, so it'll drop 4 to 6 inches as opposed to breaking 4 to 6 inches wider. So that was something that I always used, and the lefty was very, he had a lot to offer. But you had to ask him. He's not going to offer unless you came up and really specifically asking questions. But he was fun to be around. He was great. He was great to be around. I always enjoyed being around Lefty. He was always fun. He was a fun person to go out to dinner with and do different things with. He was very, very fun person.
What about,
Pete Rose,
yeah,
he was a little different. The position players in Philadelphia kind of hung together, and the pitchers kind of hung together in Philadelphia. It was a little different in Chicago with the Cubs. We all hung together as a team.
With Pete, did you in that time you were with him with the Phillies? I mean, did you have any inkling of the potential that could, the Pete Rose story and how it ended up? Did you see any inkling? Any early signs that Pete was going to run into trouble the way he did?
Well, he was a gambler, and he was always, and he would talk. He said, "I don't drink, but I sit up until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning watching ESPN." So yeah, he was a little different, and but he would go to the dog track. He was horse track. He was always going somewhere to bet on the horses or the dogs, wherever we were, whether we were in Florida or in Philadelphia. He had a driver, and he had somebody pick him up and take him to various, and then the Atlantic City was there, casinos there, so yeah, there was some inclinations that, he was a gambler, and that was, it's something that's, it's addictive like anything else, and you start getting carried away with it, it's very destructive, can be.
Do you have any opinion, Warren, on the way Major League Baseball has dealt with Pete since that incident and never really coming close to reinstating him?
Well, not only Pete, I have a hard time with Pete being the all-time hit leader, Barry Bonds being the all-time home run leader, Roger Clemens winning 7 Cy Young, and none of those three are in the Hall of Fame. What does that say about the game? You're in the Hall of Fame as a player, not as and so you do. And I think a lot of the Hall of Fame members are they are held in the high esteem, and they don't believe those guys should be in there. For Clemens and Bonds with the steroid issues, it's going to take a long time for them to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. If everything you see when you walk in the door of any clubhouse in professional baseball is, I can't remember what number it is, but it's a gambling. You can't gamble, period. And it's huge, and it's in big letters, and you understand that from day one. There's an integrity about the game, and the people, again, the Hall of Fame members are, they're held in high esteem, and the Bonds, the Clemens, the Roses have broken the trust of that, of the Hall of Fame. So, it's understanding how they don't get in, but I think in time they will. Eventually, the steroid era is going to come to pass, and I think gambling will come to pass in time. It's just sad it's not there now.
I agree. I'm kind of the inkling. My opinion is, and for whatever that's worth, is to put guys like that in, but and warts and all. I mean, on their plaque, suspended for gambling on baseball, or caught up in the steroid scandals of the 2000s, whatever the situation is. Put them in. They belong in there, and tell their story as it happened.
Right.
So, sounds like you're kind of in the same place.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So again, great teams you played with in Philadelphia. You end up in 80, let's see, what was it, 82-ish, I guess, moving on to the White Sox, not playing a whole lot. What was it like? What was your feeling leaving that Phillies team? Were you?
Well, it was time for me to move on. I was struggling in my career, and I needed to hear maybe some new sound out of pitching coach for teams and stuff. I went to the White Sox for the month of September 1982.
Yeah.
And the main reason, Jim Bunning was my agent. I wanted him to move me because I had incentives in my contract, and I knew if I went back to Philadelphia for that September, I wasn't going to pitch. And if I didn't pitch in that month of September, I prepared myself when I went back to the minor leagues to pitch again in the big leagues. I went out and ran 2 miles every day. I did not miss a day from the middle of June to the 1st of September. Preparing myself mentally to get back to the big leagues. If I get another shot, I'm going to be ready and take advantage of it. And then going to just getting a new change of scenery was very beneficial. And playing for Tony La Russa was exciting. I enjoyed playing for Tony. He was the guy that pulled me aside the first day I got there and said, "We don't have any heroes here. We're in this. We're a team. This is a team organization, and we're going to win as a team. We lose as a team." And, I enjoyed what he had to say and how he was going to go about managing. If you ever have any questions, my door is always open.
Mm-hmm.
He was a real player's manager. And doing that and then seeing the talent that they had there, oh, man, I couldn't believe they had some young arms, Rich Dodson, Britt Burns, Dewey Lamar Hoyt.
Yeah.
They had outstanding young arms. And you go, this team's going to win. Of course, they won the division in '83. But, it came and went. But they were an outstanding organization. They were really building, and they just couldn't sustain it. And then I was traded in January of '83 to the Cubs. And now I'm back with Billy Connors, who was my pitching coach in AAA in the late '70s. Before I got called up to the big league. So I have somebody that's very familiar with my delivery. I struggled all through spring training that year. I struggled through the first 6 weeks of the season. I finally said, "Billy, I need to go down to the bullpen. I want you to watch me throw a little bit." And he immediately made an adjustment in my delivery. And I proceeded to go from, I believe, May 25th to July 16th without giving up a run. I went 30 and a third innings, 30 and 2/3 innings, 30 appearances without giving up a run. Got back to where I was able to sink the ball again. Gave up 1 home run that season. So, now I'm back. I finally figured out what it took for me to be successful. I learned to change up, so I added a pitch. So now I'm a 3-pitch pitcher. And now I'm really having fun pitching because now I've got to change up to keep everybody off my fastball. I've lost the velocity in my fastball. So now I've got to learn how to pitch, and I know the hitters. So I've got to, I already know the majority of them. So I've already got a plan on how I'm going to attack them, and now I've got a change up. So if anybody gets on my fastball, now the next pitch is going to be a change up. So I lost the velocity. I get 2 strikes on people. I couldn't put people away again with my sinker. Mm-hmm. So I started my change up, and they couldn't put it in play. So I used that as a strikeout pitch. I got 2 strikes on a hitter. I started throwing change ups. So I changed my whole velocity of pitching.
Well, they had some nucleus, a nucleus of a good team. It wasn't a really good record in '83, but in '84, that team comes together. A few new faces, a new manager, and you're in the playoffs again.
Right.
What changed for that team? I mean, obviously, Rick Sutcliffe came in at midseason. There was a managerial change. What was the big thing you think that got that team from, being 20 games under 500 to winning the division the next year?
Well, the biggest thing was Dallas Green taking over as the general manager of the Cubs.
Good point.
He wheeled and deal. I mean, he traded the big trade he made was Ivan De Jesus for Larry Boa, and by the way, just throw in Ryan Sandberg.
Throw in, right?
Yeah, and so that was a steal, and Ryan Sandberg, obviously, his career speaks for itself. And I played with Ryan in the minor league, and you knew what type of player he was. He was, I mean, if there was anybody that played this game without effort, it was him. It was amazing to watch him in Chicago go from first to third on a base hit to the outfield. I mean, it's just amazing how he did everything so effortlessly. I went out and played golf with him one day, and for 18 holes, he made one bad shot. He was just a phenomenal athlete. Again, an all-state basketball player, football player, baseball player in the state of Washington growing up. One of the best. He and Mike Schmidt were by far the best two athletes I ever played with.
Would you rank one above the other? Because I was going to ask you if Sandberg was the best.
Yeah, they both, the lack of effort, as effortless as they could possibly play. I mean, it just, you would take six and half dozen of the other. Mm-hmm. You couldn't, I could, to this day, I could never choose, You'd give, maybe in a baseball sense, you'd have to give Schmitty the nod because he hit more home runs than Rhino did. But other than that, as far as players, they each had their own thing. They were all great defensive players. Anything hit to the right side was an out. He covered so much ground at second base. It was unbelievable. And I was very fortunate. The biggest thing in my career, to me, was I didn't give up but maybe 3 or 4 unearned runs my entire career. I was sitting one night and talking to my oldest son and saying, I can't remember giving up too many unearned runs. I looked on my baseball card. I pitched 4 years in the big leagues before I gave up an unearned run. That's how good our defense was.
That's pretty good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was the playoffs that year against San Diego. You guys get up 2-0, and it looks like you're cruising to the Cubs' first World Series in,
right,
however many years it was at that point.
Right.
Right.
About that was the 1945 Cubs played the Detroit Tigers, and Steve Trout's father, Dizzy Trout, pitched against the Cubs for Detroit in that series. So now Steve's going to pitch against Detroit when we go to the World Series and play Detroit, except we don't get there.
I mean, that had to be a heartbreaking loss. I mean, you talked about 77 with the Dodgers and
right.
how deflating was that. How does this compare? Is it worse?
Yeah, I think it's stung a little worse. Yeah, because that with the Dodgers, it would have been just a 2-1 lead. Having a 2-0 lead, and almost looking by going to San Diego and playing a 3-game series, and even thinking about losing all 3. It never entered your mind. And pretty soon, what they did was the biggest thing that San Diego beat us in that series was with their bullpen. Their starting pitchers didn't get through the 3rd or 4th inning, I don't think, in any game. And their bullpen picked them up big time. Their bullpen was lights out in the entire series. We didn't touch them at all. And that's what, especially when we played the 3 games in San Diego, and that's what turned the series around. We had 1-1, I believe, game 3 in like the 7th inning, and Eckersley got hurt and gave up a run, and now they were going to leave their pitch. They pinch hit for their pitcher, and they went to the bullpen, and it changed everything. And then game 4, Steve Garvey hit an opposite field home run off Lee Smith to win that in extra innings. Yeah. So now we come Sunday, and Sutcliffe is 16-1 and already won game 1 of the playoffs. So he's 17-1 for the season with us. And we jump out to a 0-0 lead in the 2nd or 3rd inning. We're up 3-0, and you're sitting there going, "Hey, we're going to the World Series." Sutcliffe's going to shut them down, and we're going to win this game. but the oddity of that day was it was 90 degrees in San Diego that day, and Sutcliffe in about the sixth inning ran out of gas. It was just the heat up to him, and we've been playing in Chicago, and they haven't had any hot days in probably 6 weeks, and so the heat caught up with him. And the one thing, the biggest play of the game was the ball that went through Leon Durham's legs. That changed the whole outcome of the game. That allowed them to tie the game, and then Tony Gwynn hit a bullet past Ryan Sandberg at second base to put them up, and then with Gossage in their bullpen, it's pretty much over now. Anytime Goose came into a ball game, regardless of where he pitched, whether it was Pittsburgh, Yankees, San Diego, wherever he was, the game was over. He was shut down. You very seldom scored off Goose.
Leon Durham had a pretty good year for that team, and that had to be just an awful moment for him. How do you deal with that afterwards?
Well, it was very difficult. But that's the way he was. He was able to handle things, and us as teammates, we all make mistakes, and that just happened. It happened in a bad time, but you've got to accept that as a teammate. We're human, and we're going to make mistakes. All of us make mistakes, and it just happened at a bad time. It's kind of the same thing that Buckner went through with in Boston, except that was in a World Series. So it was a little more magnified.
Yeah.
But it's the same situation. And as a teammate, all you can do is console him and say, hey, we wouldn't have gotten this far if it wasn't for you. You're a huge part of this team, and it just at a bad time. That's just the way it goes, and you accept that.
Did he ever face any of the the negative response from the fans in Chicago the way Buckner did in Boston?
No, nothing even close to it. And the amazing thing that we came back that Sunday night. We came back from San Diego, and it was pouring down rain. And they brought us back to the international terminal, or at the international, and we loaded the buses up. And it was about 2:00 in the morning. It's pouring down rain, and there was a woman standing outside the gate with a Cubs pennant, waving her pennant in the pouring down rain at 2:00 in the morning. It was one of the saddest sights I've ever seen in my life.
That make you feel good a little. That make you feel good a little bit, though, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, but that's Chicago. I mean, that's the type of people that, that's Cub fans. They loved you. We're always the lovable losers.
Yeah. It's funny. The Red Sox had kind of the same history as the Cubs in a lot of ways. And there's I've talked to a lot of Red Sox fans, and I wonder if you feel it's this way with the Cubs now that they've won. After they finally broke their curse and won, they felt like they'd lost something by actually winning. You think there's any of that in Chicago?
Yes. Yeah, I believe. Yeah, because they've had a hard time. That nucleus has stayed together, but they've had a hard time getting anywhere in the playoffs since 2016.
Yeah.
And I think this might be their last year of keeping that nucleus together. A lot of them, Chris Bryant's a free agent. I think Rizzo might be a free agent. Some of their key players, Baez, they're all going to be free agents at the end of the year. But they're off to a good start. And I told people that, my prediction was they're not going to go very far because I didn't think they had the pitching, but they've stayed at the top of the division the whole season so far. So, and if they can pick up a player or two, a pitcher or two at the break or at the trading deadline, you never know what they can do. Because it's a offensive ballpark, and they've got some offensive players.
They do. It's a funny game. That's why we have to play the games, because you play them on paper, it would be no fun, right? So
right. Because you look at them on paper, you say that I don't see how they can compete with the Cardinals and Milwaukee, but they're doing it.
Yeah. Let me, Warren, before we talk a little bit about what you're doing today, I want to circle back because when we were talking about the Phillies and some of your teammates, I wanted to talk about Tug McGraw, who was quite a character, obviously, a great pitcher, great relief pitcher. And I know your wife is the head of the Tug McGraw Foundation now, but talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Tug and how your wife came about to be the CEO and I guess was it president and CEO?
Yes, he's the
Yeah.
president and CEO of the Tug McGraw Foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about Tug.
The biggest thing is, well, Tug and I grew up. He grew up in Vallejo, and I grew up in Napa. Vallejo and Napa are about 20 miles apart. So he had some mutual friends that he went to high school with, because in those days, Napa didn't have a Catholic high school. And Tug went to the Catholic high school there in Vallejo.
Mm-hmm.
So kids from Napa that went to Catholic school or the Catholic high school had to drive from Napa down to Vallejo. Well, I had some friends that I played baseball with as little kids. Their sister was one of Tug's classmates. So, we had some mutual friends just to start with, and when I got to the big leagues, when Tug hurt his elbow in April of 1977. So immediately, I said, I'm from Napa, and he goes, my brother lives in Napa. His cousin, he's got two cousins that live here in Napa. In fact, one lives 6 doors up the road from me. So it was always kind of a family deal. Once we got to know each other, it was always like a family type thing. Every time he would come to Napa or to California, he would stop in and say hi, and we'd all get together and have family dinners together and stuff like that. So our relationship grew even more after we both retired. So now he came back as a guest instructor in the spring of 2003, and he was doing fine. Everything was going good. He would spend the early morning with the big club, and then he would come down to the minor league where I was coaching and work with a couple of minor league pitchers, some of the left-handed pitchers. They gave him 3 or 4 kids to work with. So he came down in the afternoons with us, and then all of a sudden, he started having problems. He was getting up in the morning on days off. They had a day off, and he got up and went to the ballpark. He started becoming disoriented. Mm. And then all of a sudden collapsed, and they took him to Morton Plant Hospital in Clearwater, and they determined that he had a brain tumor and that he was needed to be operated on ASAP. So it just so happened that Tim McGraw, his son, and Faith Hill were performing in Orlando. So they were in the area. So my wife immediately flew. She came in, and she and Faith started putting their heads together on what are we going to do? What's their plan of action? What's the course of action? What are we going to do? So they looked it up, and there are 4 places that do brain tumor operations on brain tumors. MD Anderson in Houston, UCSF in San Francisco, Duke University, and University of South Florida in Tampa. So they said, well, we can just take him across the causeway. So they took him across the causeway. They consulted with a doctor. We all sat in. There was 10 or 12 of us sat in and what they're going to do. And so on St. Patrick's Day, of all days, he has brain surgery. So he goes through that. And my youngest son, who's autistic, he sees Tug, and Tug's got big staples in his head's shaved, but he's got a big U in his head. And my youngest son looks at Tug and starts calling him baseball head because it looks the seams on his head look like a baseball, so it broke up everybody, broke the tension in the room immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just, my youngest son is quite a comedian. So anyway, now what are they going to do? What's the, now he's been operated on, what's going to happen? So he couldn't travel. So his brother Hank and he rented a condominium in Tampa so he could convalesce. And I was coaching in Clearwater at the time, and I had Sundays off. So I would go Saturday night. I would pack a bag and go over and spend the weekend with them and come back early Monday morning back to Clearwater for baseball instruction or spring training type action that we did for the Phillies. So we'd go out, Hank and I'd go out and play golf, and then Tug we'd get on the green and Tug would putt. We'd try to keep him active. We'd go out to dinner. We'd do different things, try to keep him going. So finally, at the end of the spring, somewhere middle of June, he was able to travel. So Tim sent one of his buses down. So they loaded everything up. Hank, Tug, my youngest son Jack, and Jennifer, my wife. They four of them loaded up the bus and they drove up to Media, where he'd lived before, in outside of Philadelphia, and they found a house. Jennifer found a house for him to live in, so she took care of. She was his caregiver the rest of his life. So she would come. By that time, by the middle of June, Jack had to go back to school. Or no, by the 1st of September, I was home coaching, so Jack had to go back to school. So I took care of Jack, and she stayed with Tug. And then the telltale sign was Jack loves Halloween. That's his favorite, one of his favorite times of year. And I said, you got to come home for Halloween. You know how Jack loves Halloween. So she said, okay, I'll be home. So she took Tug into the doctor, and they had to give him a brain scan to see how the tumor was doing. And she said, bad news. It's continuing to grow. They can't stop it. It's, so it's just a matter of time. And then he passed away. He wanted to pass away at Tim's farm in Nashville. So we all met in Nashville that end of December. And he passed away, I believe, about the 5th or 6th of January.
Certainly a sad story. Died way too young, and
right.
Such a great, vibrant person, from
very vibrant.
The outside.
Just a great man to be around. Man's man. Just a wonderful individual. So during that time, my wife and he set up the foundation to, along with Tim and Faith, they set up a foundation to help the betterment of people with brain tumors, glioblastoma.
Well, they're doing some great work there, and I'll certainly put up a link to the website and such on my page along with this interview too. So,
thank you, Keith. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to help people who are helping other people more than anything else, for sure.
Right.
Real quick before we wrap up here, Warren, you're now the pitching coach, as we mentioned earlier, for the Napa Valley Community College.
Right.
Have you enjoyed it? You've been doing it for quite some time. I think you told me 20 years.
Yeah, on and off there for over 20 years.
Yeah. Did you have any aspirations of doing, major league pitching coach or anything in that regard, or did you just want to get back and help younger people?
I coached Philly organization for 6 years, from 1999 to 2004. And I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but it was very difficult on my family life.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the coast for 6 months and home for 6 months. So, and they let me go. And so I didn't want to pursue it anymore. I was happy. My older son was a freshman in college. I'd missed all his high school playing. I'd missed a lot of his development. So I could go out and help other kids develop. And, so for me, I looked at it and said, it's time to be home. So, and then with Jennifer taking over the Tug McGraw Foundation and traveling a lot, somebody had to stay home with Jack because he's special needs.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was way easier for me to stay home than it was for her. So I kind of took over, playing Mr. Mom, and kind of did that. And then I was able to coach my oldest son. I had one season his sophomore year in college. I got to coach him.
Oh, that must be fun.
Yeah, it was. It was fun for the both of us, and we still talk about that to this day. That was in 2007, 14 years ago. So we had a great time together. It was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed coaching at the junior college. The biggest thing is, and the way we go about it is, we're a 2-year school. We're a feeder school for 4-year schools. We don't care if we win or lose. What we're trying to do is develop you, not only in the classroom, but on the baseball field. And if you love baseball, come and play for us for 2 years, and we will send you on to a 4-year school with the objective is to get a 4-year degree. And that's something baseball is not going to last forever. That 4-year degree is going to something you will have for a lifetime, and that will benefit you immensely throughout your life.
Yeah. Good
There's
stuff.
a lot of kids. I mean, that's the reason I did it. When I was 19 and I'd gotten drafted by the Giants, and now what? I didn't know what to do. And so I know kids at that age, they're at a crossroads. What do I do? Do I want to pursue school? Do I want to continue to play baseball? So there's a lot of doubt in a lot of these kids' minds. And if me as an ex-major leaguer can lead kids to getting a 4-year education, do the work in the classroom, it's something that you'll always have the rest of your life. So I really put a lot of emphasis on that. Very important to me.
Well, that's awesome. And it's great work you're doing. As you said, a lot of these kids get wrapped up in the dream, right? And forget about the odds are against most of them, or the great majority of them.
I have had one kid make it to the big leagues that I have coached. In 2009, we had a player named Tyler Cravey. Tyler got to the big leagues with Milwaukee parts of, I think, 13 and 14, 15. He spent parts of 3 seasons up and down with Milwaukee.
Good. Well,
yeah, so I've been very fortunate. We've sent a few kids on to Division I. Not too many, because we're a kind of a lower division program. We don't get a lot of talent here unless we go out and recruit it, which the last 5 years they've allowed us to recruit, so it's changed our program a lot.
Well, you're doing some good work there, and I wish you continued luck, and your wife's doing great work, with the foundation, obviously. You've had, Lisa, you had a great career. I tell a lot of the guys that I've had on, I've had a lot of guys on from your era, Warren, and people love to hear from you guys. And, the lefties, they're all great players, right? The Steve Carlton, the Mike Schmitz. But I always tell my audience when I have you guys on that baseball, still wouldn't be baseball without the Warren Brewsters and the Greg Pryors and the guys that I've had on that are, they're not as well known, but you're important parts of really good teams.
Yeah. I was very fortunate on the teams I played on, And Greg Pryor's an old teammate of mine from Venezuela. We played in 1977 in Maracaibo.
No kidding.
Yeah. There's connections. Baseball, it's unbelievable how they connect.
It's funny. It seems like everybody I talk to has a connection with everybody else I've ever talked to. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, along the line. Yeah. You connect one way or the other somewhere along the line. It's amazing. It's such a fraternity. It's a lot of people don't get a chance to do it, and the few that are very fortunate, like myself, that were able to do it, are just you thank your lucky stars. I was very took a lot of hard work. I didn't look at it as work. I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed the challenge.
Well, you should be very proud of your career and very proud of what you're doing now. Warren, I appreciate you coming on today. It's been a great conversation with you. I wish we'd go a little bit longer. If you want to stay on the phone real quick, I'm going to just click off this broadcast, and I'll be back to finish up the show.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Warren. So Warren Brewster, guys, plethora, my favorite word, of technical difficulties this morning. I really apologize. Gosh, we had the problem with Warren's phone last night, and then we had a little problem with the audio this morning. So hopefully the experience wasn't too bad. I know some of you had jumped on a little bit later, so that's probably a good thing. And listen, we thank you for sticking through it. Carlos, some great comments there about the Pete Rose stuff, and thank you, Dave Gayette, for pointing out the audio issues. I wish I'd caught it sooner. I apologize. It's always problematic when I record stuff. Sometimes I need to click a certain box, and sometimes I don't. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you for sticking it out with me. I thank Warren Brewster, doing some great stuff out there at Napa Valley. His wife's doing some great stuff with the Tug McGraw Foundation. And guys like Warren Brewster, as I said, have made Major League Baseball go for a long time. The stars are important, but the guys, the lifers, the the grinders like Warren Brusstar are what I really enjoy digging into when it comes to Major League Baseball. So thank you, Warren. Thank you all for watching. Next week, guys, Sunday we'll have our Stream of Consciousness show. I'll have Jim Beringer from The Last Word on Hockey on to talk about the Canadians getting to the Cup final for the first time since 1993. We've got Game 7 tonight of the Islanders and the Lightning. We'll be talking about all of that. We'll talk about the Major League Baseball news, some NFL news, and some other stuff. And I'll be on the Mac and Jack show here in just a few minutes as well. And next week, with the holiday week, we're in flux a little bit. I'll let you guys know early in the week what we're going to be doing as far as Friday and Sunday shows. So, guys, great job. Carlos, you're killing me. We'll pick that up Sunday, Carlos, with Jim Beringer. Guys, been a great Friday. Been a great interview. Apologize for technical difficulties. Thanks for being with me. Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talk on the Northeast Stream Sports Network. You guys make us go. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.